Have you ever been alone in a place that isn't supposed to be alive, yet feels like it's watching you? Where every shadow moves with intent, every whisper follows you, and the darkness has teeth. Tonight, one man will descend into the hidden veins of New York City's subway. One wrong step, one echo of his own heartbeat, and he will discover something ancient, patient, and hungry. The lights flicker. The last train is gone. The station breathes. And beneath the steel and concrete, something waits. Something that doesn't just see you. It remembers you. Do you dare follow Marcus into the tunnels where reality bends, shadows think, and fear is alive? Because once you step into the darkness, there's no turning back. This is not a story. This is an awakening. The sound of metal wheels grinding against the tracks echoed through Union Square Station as the last train of the night pulled away. It was just past 3 a.m., and the underground tunnels fell into a suffocating silence. The only movement was the gentle sway of trash stirred up by the departing train's wake. An empty coffee cup rolling in slow circles, a discarded newspaper flattening against the grimy tiles. Marcus Hale stood at the far end of the platform, leaning on his mop like a tired soldier resting on a spear. He had worked as a subway cleaner for nearly 20 years, and he knew the rhythm of the underground better than anyone. The rush hour chaos, the midnight drunks, the eerie calm that came after the final train. Normally, he found comfort in that silence. It was a predictable routine. But tonight, something about the stillness felt heavier. He glanced down the platform. Rows of fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead, some flickering with a nervous buzz. The shadows between the columns stretched unnaturally long, as though the station itself was holding its breath. Marcus tried to shake off the unease. Just another night, he muttered to himself, pushing the mop across the stained concrete. His voice sounded too loud, swallowed quickly by the endless tunnels. The radio clipped to his belt crackled, then went dead. He frowned, tapping the device. The reception in the lower stations was always terrible, but it usually carried at least static. Tonight, there was nothing. Just a wall of silence pressing in around him. As he worked, his eyes drifted toward the dark mouth of the tunnel. The rails gleamed faintly, stretching into the black, but something about that void drew him in. He could have sworn he heard something beyond the normal groans of the old structure. Not rats, not dripping water, something heavier. Footsteps. The sound was faint but unmistakable, echoing up from the tunnel. Measured, deliberate. Too slow and heavy to belong to a stray commuter sneaking around. Marcus froze, gripping his mop tighter. "Hello?" His voice bounced back at him in fractured pieces, as though the station itself mocked his words. No answer. His heart beat a little faster. Had seen homeless people down here before, sometimes kids daring each other to sneak into the tunnels. But those steps had a rhythm that unsettled him. He tried to return to his work, sweeping trash into a pile near the bench, but every time the mop scraped the floor, he thought he heard that other sound again. Footsteps, perfectly matching his, just a fraction behind. He stopped. The sound stopped. Marcus swallowed hard, sweat prickling at the back of his neck. He forced a laugh. "Losing it, old man. You're just tired." But when he turned back toward the tunnel, he saw it. A figure, just at the edge of the light. Tall, thin, motionless, the shape of a person, but too still, as though carved from shadow itself. Marcus blinked, and it was gone. The silence pressed tighter. He felt suddenly aware of the emptiness around him, of the fact that he was 50 feet underground with no one else on the platform. Then came the whisper. At first he thought it was the faint hiss of the electricity running through the lights. But no, it had tone, rhythm. Words stretched thin, too quiet to make sense of. The sound seemed to curl around his head, circling him. He froze, straining to listen. And then, unmistakably, the whisper formed into a single word. Marcus. The mop clattered from his hands. His name. Someone, or something, had spoken his name. He backed away from the tunnel, eyes darting across the shadows, searching for a source. His mind raced, clawing for a logical explanation. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the security staff upstairs were messing with him through the PA system. But the loudspeakers hadn't worked in this section for years. The whisper came again, closer this time, slithering along the platform like smoke. Marcus. His chest tightened. He stumbled backward until he nearly tripped over the bench. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to get upstairs, to find another human being. But the cleaner in him, the man who had walked these stations for decades, refused to abandon his post so easily. He forced himself to grab the mop again, clutching it like a weapon. His knuckles whitened. He stepped toward the tunnel, peering into the dark. Nothing, just the stale air of the underground and the faint smell of ozone. But as Marcus turned to leave, his blood ran cold. On the far wall of the platform, just beyond the sweep of his flashlight, was a shadow. Not his, something taller, broader, standing perfectly still. And as he raised the beam toward it, the shadow didn't vanish. It stepped forward. Marcus staggered back, the flashlight trembling in his grip, the mop forgotten again on the floor. The shadow advanced slowly, deliberately, each step echoing on the tiles. And then, with a hiss of flickering lights, the entire platform went black. The lights flickered back on, weak and trembling, revealing the same empty platform Marcus had known for years, yet somehow different. The air felt thicker, heavier, as if the walls themselves were pressing inward. His pulse hammered in his ears, a relentless drum echoing the unease crawling up his spine. The shadow was gone. At least, he thought it was. But every instinct screamed that he was being watched. Marcus wiped his sweaty palms on his uniform, trying to steady himself, telling himself he had imagined the shape, the movement, the whisper of his name. Then he heard it again, a soft scrape along the edge of the tracks. It was too deliberate to be a rat or debris. He froze, straining to locate the sound, and in that frozen instant, he realized it was mirroring him. Every small step he took backward, the scraping responded. Every twitch of his fingers, every shuffle of his boots, echoed from the shadows. And with each mirrored movement, the temperature of the air seemed to drop, like the cold was seeping from the walls themselves. Marcus swallowed hard. This isn't real. It can't be real. But his words were swallowed by the station, consumed by the vastness of concrete and steel. He stepped closer to the tracks, peering down into the blackness. The rails gleamed faintly under the dim lights, stretching into the tunnel like endless silver ribbons. And then he saw it, a second shadow, perfectly aligned with the first, slipping across the edge of the platform. It didn't have form, no discernible face, no limbs he could identify clearly, but it moved like it had intent, like it had been waiting for him. Marcus' heart hammered. He backed away, but something deep inside urged him to stay, to see it clearly. Years in the subway had taught him the signs of danger, the patterns of human behavior, but this wasn't human. He flicked his flashlight toward the rails. The beam caught something that made his stomach twist, a pair of gleaming eyes, black as void, reflecting his light like tiny mirrors. And they weren't far. They were following him. He spun, swinging the flashlight wildly, searching the shadows. Nothing, only the hollow echo of the last train. But the eyes had not moved. They remained, always at the periphery of his vision, tracking him, patient and unblinking. Marcus stumbled back toward the far end of the platform. His mop had slipped from his hands again, clattering onto the tiles with a hollow, echoing thud. The shadow seemed to flicker at the edges of the light. It wasn't just copying him anymore. It was anticipating him, predicting his moves. The whisper returned, a low, sibilant hiss curling around his ears. Not his name this time, but words that he couldn't comprehend, garbled and fragmented. Follow to don't leave da stay. He shook his head, trying to dispel the sound. Rationality was failing him, slipping through his fingers like water. He had cleaned these tunnels for decades. He knew every hidden corner, every abandoned maintenance hatch, every pipe and vent. Nothing had ever moved like this. Then he saw the movement at the tunnel entrance, a flicker of motion, subtle, almost imperceptible, but wrong in every way. It moved like the shadows themselves were stretching, elongating unnaturally. Marcus realized that the figure wasn't just a shape. It was merging with the darkness, becoming the platform, becoming the station. Panic surged. He turned to run, but the platform seemed to warp around him. Tiles that had been straight now seemed slanted, corners too sharp, shadows too deep. The lights above flickered violently, casting long, quivering silhouettes that danced across the walls and floors. And then, from the corner of his eye, he saw it. A figure standing directly across the tracks, mirroring him perfectly. Same stance, same angle, same hesitation, as if it were a living reflection. But this reflection was wrong. The head was too high, the limbs too long, and its eyes, those endless, empty eyes, fixed on him with pure hunger. Marcus' legs buckled. He stumbled backward, almost toppling onto the rails, heart hammering, sweat pouring down his forehead. He grabbed the edge of the platform for support, forcing himself to breathe. The shadow advanced. Not fast, but deliberate. Every step measured, echoing through the station like the tolling of a bell. Marcus' flashlight flickered and died, plunging him into darkness once more. And in that darkness, he heard the rails hum, not with the vibration of a train, but with something alive beneath the tracks. Something moving, something waiting, something that had been there all along. And then, the whispering began again, louder, more urgent. That you can't leave, you can't leave. Marcus realized with a jolt of terror that he wasn't just being watched. He was being hunted. And somewhere, deep in the darkness of the tunnels, the thing was learning his every move. Marcus stumbled backward, knees weak, barely catching himself on the edge of the platform. The darkness of the tunnel ahead seemed alive, pulsating as if breathing. The faint hum beneath the tracks grew louder, a rhythmic vibration that sank deep into his bones. Every instinct screamed at him to run, yet his feet refused to obey. Then he heard it, a whisper. It was so faint at first that Marcus thought he imagined it. A thread of sound curling from the tunnel, almost like someone speaking behind a thick wall. He froze, straining to hear. The whisper grew, shifting and twisting, a chorus of voices layered over each other, all speaking his name, all calling him forward. Marcus, Marcus, come. The air turned icy, biting at his lungs, condensing in front of his face like ghostly breath. Marcus swallowed hard, trying to force rational thought, but the whispers were insistent, hypnotic, coaxing him deeper into the black. They weren't human, yet they weren't entirely silent. Every syllable lingered, vibrating through his chest. He glanced at the platform lights, flickering, unreliable, barely illuminating the far end. Beyond the pool of weak light, the tunnel yawned like a gaping maw, swallowing the shadows. And from within it, movement flickered, just at the edge of his vision. Marcus gritted his teeth and forced himself to take a step forward, one trembling foot in front of the other. His mop, abandoned on the platform, lay like a lifeline he couldn't reach. Each step echoed unnaturally, bouncing off the tunnel walls in patterns that didn't match the geometry of the station. The whispers seemed to respond, growing louder, circling him, tightening, curling into his ears. That you belong. Marcus, stay. He swallowed, his mind racing. In all his years underground, he had heard strange sounds, pipes groaning, rats squeaking, the occasional drunk mumbling, but nothing like this. This was deliberate, calculated, malevolent. Something intelligent was waiting, something that knew him. As he edged further into the tunnel, the temperature dropped sharply. His breath steamed, frost forming along the edges of his jacket. And then he saw it, glimmering faintly against the far wall, a reflection of himself. At first, he thought it was the light catching the tiles, but the figure moved independently. It wasn't him. Its posture mirrored his, but the movements were slightly off, jerky, unnatural, like a puppet being controlled by unseen strings. Marcus stumbled back, pressing against the tunnel wall, heart pounding like a drum in a war zone. He wanted to run, but his legs were locked in terror. And then the whispers changed. They weren't saying his name anymore. Now they were laughing, a soft, low, almost childlike giggle, echoing along the tracks, then splitting into hundreds of voices, layering over each other like a chorus of insanity. That run. Do. Run. We're here. We're here. His flashlight flickered and died completely. He was swallowed by absolute darkness, save for the dim flicker of the distant platform lights. In the black, he could see shapes, long, sinuous, creeping along the walls. Shadows that weren't shadows, shapes that moved without rhythm, curling and stretching toward him. A voice whispered directly into his ear, inside his mind, bypassing the world entirely. "Marcus, you can't leave," he screamed, spinning in place, arms outstretched, but the tunnel seemed endless. The walls stretched farther than they should, twisting around him, corridors bending and reforming. Every exit he tried vanished into shadow. Then, from deep beneath the tracks, the hum turned into a low growl, vibrating through the steel and concrete. Something large, impossibly large, moved beneath him, its presence pressed up against the floor, through the walls, through the very air he breathed. And from within the darkness, he caught glimpses of eyes, hundreds of tiny, glimmering eyes, all reflecting a light that shouldn't exist. Marcus tried to retreat, but his back hit something solid. Another wall, another tunnel, though he was certain there should have been nothing there. Panic overtook him. He ran blindly, following the whispers, trying to find the platform, the exit, anything human, but the corridor twisted, leading him deeper. "Punto come, stay with us." The whispers had become a song now, a dirge, pulling him forward. Each note echoed in his skull, wrapping around his thoughts, making it harder to distinguish reality from hallucination. And then, just ahead, a faint light shimmered, a rectangle of flickering yellow. A door. Marcus lunged for it, shoving it open, expecting to find a maintenance closet or a stairwell. Instead, he stepped into a room that shouldn't exist. Rusted machinery lined the walls, pipes hanging like jagged teeth. The air smelled of decay and ozone. And at the far end, standing perfectly still, was the shadow. Not a shadow now. Something more. Taller, broader, with limbs that bent wrong. A face that was almost human but not. Eyes black voids that reflected all the fear in Marcus' soul. It tilted its head, slowly, deliberately, and spoke in that same sibilant whisper. "That you're ours now, Marcus." Marcus stumbled backward, hitting the wall, heart hammering, legs trembling. He wanted to scream, to run, to disappear, but the whisper surged again, now inside him, inescapable, consuming every thought. The last thing he saw before he blacked out was the shadow stepping closer, the room twisting around it, and hundreds of glowing eyes opening from the walls themselves, hungry, patient, inevitable. Marcus awoke with a jolt, sprawled on the cold, damp concrete floor of a room he didn't recognize. The air smelled of rust and something far fouler, like decaying metal mixed with mold. His flashlight lay several feet away, dimly flickering. Panic surged as he realized he had no memory of how he got here. The whispers from the tunnel were gone, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed against him from all sides. He pushed himself up, knees trembling. The walls were lined with corroded machinery and rusted pipes, some dripping water that sizzled faintly where it touched the floor. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching unnaturally. Something about the room felt off, impossible, as though the station itself had folded in on itself to create a space that shouldn't exist. Then he saw it, a metal door, old and battered, partially hidden behind a stack of wooden crates. Marcus froze. He had walked these stations for decades and had never seen this door. It wasn't on any maps. It hadn't been part of the plans. And yet, there it stood, humming with a faint energy, the edges vibrating subtly as if alive. Something deep in him screamed, "Don't go in." But curiosity, or perhaps survival instinct, overpowered reason. Marcus approached slowly, every step echoing hollowly. The closer he got, the more he noticed the door's details, the scratches along its surface, almost like claw marks, and the faint smear of something dark and sticky near the handle. His stomach churned. With a trembling hand, he reached for the handle. The metal was icy, biting through his gloves. As he pushed, a hiss of air escaped from within, smelling of rust, wet earth, and decay. He peered inside. The room beyond was smaller than he expected, barely lit by a single flickering bulb. And yet, within the shadows, shapes shifted. Figures crouched, twisted, motionless, and then, suddenly, their heads snapped toward him, though none of them had eyes, only empty sockets reflecting the dim light like black mirrors. Marcus stumbled back, heart pounding. "No, this can't be," he whispered, voice cracking. He looked around, searching for a weapon, anything that could protect him. His flashlight. He lunged for it and flicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the room in stark, cold white. The creatures inside the room did not move like humans. Their limbs bent wrong, their heads tilted at impossible angles, but all their attention was on Marcus. They knew he was there, as though the air itself had betrayed him. And then he saw the tracks. Beyond the room, a narrow maintenance corridor sloped downward into complete darkness. At the very edge, glowing faintly in the beam of his flashlight, were tiny, glimmering footprints, slick and wet, leading deeper underground. Marcus realized with a chill that they weren't human. Not entirely. A whisper curled around him, soft but insistent, echoing from the walls, the pipes, the very air. "Punto come." Come closer. Don't be afraid. Marcus stumbled backward, his flashlight beam shaking. The room seemed to breathe, walls contracting and expanding subtly. His mind raced. He knew instinctively that whatever had been stalking him wasn't bound by walls or doors. The station itself was a living trap, and the forgotten door was a threshold into something far darker. A sudden movement at the far corner of the room made him spin. Something large and misshapen slid along the floor, limbs scraping against concrete with wet, echoing thuds. He froze, unable to tear his eyes away. The thing's form was fluid, amorphous, yet terrifyingly aware. It paused at the edge of the flashlight's beam, and for a moment, Marcus thought it had no face. And then, in the dim glow, he saw a hint of a grin, wide, unnatural, and inhuman. Marcus' chest tightened. Every horror story he had ever heard about the underground, the missing workers, the unexplained disappearances, flashed in his mind. None of it had felt real until now. Something hissed from the shadows, a sound like metal scraping bone. Then the whisper that the station remembers. It chooses, and you are chosen. Marcus stumbled back, desperate to escape, but the door slammed shut behind him with a deafening clang. His flashlight flickered violently, then died. Darkness swallowed him entirely. In that moment, Marcus understood. The subway had layers, hidden spaces, living corridors, and he had crossed into one it had never intended for him to see. He was no longer a mere observer. He was part of the station's game. And somewhere deep below, the faint rumble of metal moving indicated that whatever lurked in the tunnels had noticed him, and it was coming. Marcus pressed his back against the cold, steel door, heart hammering like a drum in his chest. Darkness had swallowed him, the flashlight long dead, and the whispers of the subway seemed to grow louder, curling around his ears like a living thing. He could feel it. The station itself had shifted, bending reality into something unrecognizable, something hungry. He fumbled blindly across the floor, hands scraping against rough concrete. Each step echoed into the abyss, yet he could hear another sound layered beneath it. Another heartbeat, slow and deliberate, matching his own. The metallic tang of blood and decay filled his nostrils. Panic clawed at his throat. Then, in the faint glow of a flickering emergency light, Marcus saw the room ahead. It was a chamber no map or plan had ever recorded. Hidden deep beneath the subway's known tunnels, rusted machinery lined the walls, pipes snaking like the veins of some ancient, metallic beast. Broken crates and debris littered the floor, and the air was thick, almost viscous, making every breath a struggle. Something moved in the corner of the room. Marcus froze. Shadows shifted unnaturally, corners bending and stretching in ways that defied logic. And there, partially obscured by darkness, he saw them, the figures from the door. Their forms were humanoid but grotesque, limbs bent at impossible angles, skin pale and stretched tight over unnatural bones. Eyes, black and empty, glimmered faintly, reflecting the light with a malevolent intelligence. A chill ran down his spine. The whispers returned, soft, insistent, now forming fragments of words that slithered into his mind. "Da join. Stay. belong. Ours. Marcus swallowed, trying to push past the terror. He had to move, had to find an escape. But every instinct he relied upon, the familiar knowledge of the subway, the countless hours spent walking its tunnels, felt useless here. The underground room was a maze, a living trap, and he was its prey. As he inched forward, the figures did not move. They watched, their heads tilted in perfect unison, following his every motion. One stepped forward, slowly, its movements jerky, unnatural, yet deliberate. Marcus raised his hands in defense, though he knew it would do nothing. The air grew colder. Frost formed along the edges of pipes, curling like frozen fingers. A low hum began to vibrate through the walls, through the floor, through Marcus himself. It was a sound that belonged to the station, to the tunnels, but also to something beneath them, something alive, enormous, and patient. Marcus stumbled over debris and landed near a series of old maintenance hatches. His eyes fell on a stack of dusty crates, and behind them, another door. This one was smaller, reinforced with heavy steel, and a faint, sickly yellow light pulsed from beneath it. He knew, instinctively, that this was the way forward, that it was the only chance of survival. He gripped the handle, hand shaking violently. As he lifted it, the shadows around him shifted, creeping closer, edges curling like smoke. The whispers intensified, now shouting in overlapping voices. "You cannot leave. You are ours. You belong." Marcus forced the door open and stepped through. The room beyond was smaller, almost claustrophobic, with walls lined with old subway electrical panels. Rusty pipes groaned, and the floor was slick with water and something else. Footsteps echoed from below, far too heavy to be human, dragging slowly, deliberately. He froze. The shadows were no longer just in the room. They were under the floor, inside the walls, moving in ways he couldn't comprehend. From the darkness, a low, guttural growl vibrated through his bones, and a shape emerged from beneath the panels. A humanoid figure, taller than any man, with limbs that twisted and stretched impossibly. Its face was almost human, but distorted, the mouth too wide, the grin too knowing, too sinister. Marcus stumbled back, heart pounding. His breath came in ragged gasps. There was no weapon, no escape, no hope, but his survival instinct screamed at him to move. He ran blindly through the room, feet slipping on the wet floor. The creature followed, silent except for the faint scrape of its claws against concrete, moving impossibly fast, keeping pace with him in the suffocating darkness. Then he saw it, a series of hatches leading downward into the bowels of the subway, where light and sound dared not penetrate. Marcus didn't hesitate. He pried one open and dropped into the darkness below, landing hard on cold stone. The whispers followed, growing louder, now chanting his name in a dozen voices. "Marcus, Marcus, ours, ours, ours." He scrambled forward, deeper into the tunnels, and the shadows shifted around him like a living fog. The creature above had not yet descended, but Marcus knew it was waiting, hunting, patient, inevitable. And as he ran, he realized with a sinking horror, this room, this section of the subway, was just one layer. The station held countless layers, each more terrifying than the last. And Marcus had been drawn deeper, into a world that no human had ever returned from. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him completely was the faint reflection of hundreds of glowing eyes in the wet walls of the tunnel, eyes that were now following him, everywhere he looked, waiting. Marcus' lungs burned as he scrambled down the narrow, wet maintenance hatch, landing with a heavy thud on the cold stone floor below. Darkness enveloped him completely, the air thick and stagnant, carrying a metallic tang that turned his stomach. The muffled echo of footsteps above suggested the creature had followed him, or perhaps it was only waiting, patient, knowing he had nowhere truly safe to run. The tunnel stretched before him like an endless black artery. Pipes snaked along the walls, dripping water in uneven rhythms. Every sound Marcus made, every shuffle of his boots, every shallow breath, seemed to resonate through the stone, magnified and distorted, bouncing back at him from the shadows. Then he felt it, a tremor beneath his feet, subtle at first, then growing stronger. Something massive stirred below the tunnel floor. The hum of the station, once a distant vibration, became a groaning, living sound, vibrating through his chest, into his bones. Marcus froze. From the darkness came a low, guttural growl, the kind of sound that no human throat could produce. It reverberated along the walls, echoing endlessly, warping the space around him. His flashlight flickered to life with a weak beam, revealing nothing, but the darkness was moving. Not shadows, not reflections. Something beneath the floor, shaping the very stone and steel, waiting. Marcus' heart raced. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but which way? The tunnel twisted impossibly, bending at angles that shouldn't exist. He stumbled over puddles of stagnant water, the slick surfaces making him skid, the flashlight shaking violently in his grip. Then he saw movement ahead, a glimmer, a ripple along the floor. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, but as he squinted, something enormous began to emerge, a shape, grotesque and unreadable, pushing up from the very stone beneath him. Limbs bent wrong, too long, joints cracking at unnatural angles. Its head, if it could be called that, tilted slowly, black eyes reflecting his flashlight like twin voids, wide and patient. Marcus stumbled backward, tripping over a pipe, slamming into the wall. The creature followed silently, fluidly, moving faster than any human should be able to. Its limbs slid across the floor with wet, echoing thuds, and as it advanced, the walls themselves seemed to shudder under its presence. A whisper echoed in his mind, clearer now, impossible to ignore, that you cannot escape. Beneath, beneath, beneath. The voice seemed to come from the thing itself, or perhaps the station. It was impossible to tell. Panic clawed at Marcus' chest. He ran blindly, following the tunnel as it wound downward into even greater darkness. The faint hum of electricity and metal pulsing along the tracks, now joined by the growls of the beast pursuing him. He tried to reason. It had to be a man, or a rat, or some deranged urban legend brought to life. But the scale, the speed, the impossible way it moved, told him otherwise. The creature was something older than the station, older than the city above, patient and endless, and it knew him. It had learned him. Every stumble, every breath, every movement had been anticipated. Marcus felt the floor beneath him flex. Tiny vibrations became full tremors. The air smelled worse now, thick with decay, metal, and something alive. He realized with horror that the tunnel itself was not solid. The walls and floors were malleable in the creature's presence, bending around it, letting it move through them like water. Ahead, faint light glimmered, a maintenance exit, or a trick of his mind. He didn't stop to think. He ran, boots splashing through water, heart hammering. Behind him, the thing below pressed closer, not with speed, but inevitability. Its presence was overwhelming, consuming, and Marcus knew every step forward was already predicted, every escape mapped in the creature's awareness. The whispers surged again, overlapping into a chorus, all around him, inside him, that you belong. Beneath, beneath, ours. Marcus stumbled into a wider chamber, walls lined with old subway wiring and broken machinery. Shadows pooled in the corners, moving independently of the light. And then he saw them, the eyes. Hundreds of them, flickering from the walls, ceilings, and floors, all watching him, glowing faintly like embers in a black fireplace. The creature rose from beneath the floor, its body vast, limbs snapping into impossible angles, eyes fixed on Marcus. It opened its mouth, if mouth it had, and hissed a sound that vibrated the very air. Marcus felt it in his teeth, in his skull, in his chest. Pure intent, pure hunger. He backed into a corner, heart hammering, knowing he could not fight it. He had no weapon, no leverage, no hope. The station itself seemed alive, colluding with the creature, warping space around him, closing exits, folding tunnels in impossible ways. A wet, echoing slap against the floor indicated the thing was about to strike. Marcus' last thought before the darkness swallowed him was one of utter terror. I am not escaping. I am already beneath. Marcus awoke in a dimly lit room. the air thick with the smell of mildew and burnt metal. His muscles screamed from the long fall into the underground chamber, and his mind spun, desperate to piece together where he was. The darkness of the tunnels above, the unseen creature lurking beneath. Everything pressed on him like a suffocating weight. Before him, scattered across the floor, were dozens of old reel-to-reel tapes. Dust coated them, and most labels were illegible, but a few had dates scrawled in fading ink. 1962, 1974, 1989. Marcus' curiosity, or perhaps his desperation, drove him to kneel and pick one up. The tape's reel gleamed faintly under the weak light. He found a battered tape player in the corner, wires fraying like exposed veins. With shaking hands, he fed the tape in and pressed play. Static hissed, then a voice emerged, weak, distorted, yet unmistakably human. They said we shouldn't dig too deep. The station remembers. It sees us. Marcus' stomach turned. The voice was panicked, terrified, and fragmented. As the tape played, he realized it was a recording of someone who had worked down here decades ago. The whispers, the moving shadows, the impossible tunnels, they weren't new. They had been here long before him. Another tape, another voice. It's beneath the tracks. We tried to hide it. No one believed us. The tunnels, they twist, they take. Marcus felt a chill crawl up his spine. Each tape was a diary of madness, of workers who had vanished without explanation, of janitors, engineers, and security personnel who had gone missing over decades. The common thread, something alive beneath the subway, patient, intelligent, and cruel. As he listened, he realized the whispers he had been hearing weren't hallucinations. They were recorded, documented in these tapes, preserved by people who had known the station was alive. The last tape he picked up was different. No human voice, just static, and then a whisper that cut directly into his mind. "Marcus, we've been waiting." He dropped the tape, stumbling backward. The shadows in the room shifted, elongating unnaturally. Something moved behind the walls, a fluid, formless presence, watching him, aware of every twitch, every heartbeat. The station itself was alive, feeding on fear, stretching its corridors to trap intruders. Marcus' flashlight flickered weakly. The walls of the room seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting subtly, as if the station were inhaling him. Panic surged. He had to leave, had to escape before whatever lurked below learned he had found the tapes. But the exit wasn't obvious. The room twisted in ways that defied logic. A corner that should have been solid was hollow, shadows pooling like liquid. From the dark, a faint glow appeared, a corridor leading downward, deeper into the station's heart. Marcus knew instinctively this was the path forward. He moved cautiously, heart hammering, clutching his flashlight like a lifeline. As he stepped into the corridor, the whispers returned, louder, layered, echoing from every pipe and tile. "That you belong. Beneath. Marcus. Beneath." A faint movement caught his eye. A shadow detached itself from a wall, elongated and humanoid, and advanced silently. Its black eyes reflected the light like voids, and its presence pressed against Marcus' mind, filling him with despair and dread. He ran. The corridor twisted impossibly, turning back on itself, the walls closing in. Pipes groaned and hissed, and every step he took was mirrored by the shadow, moving with impossible precision. Then he stumbled upon an old service door, half buried in debris. The handle was warm to the touch, almost pulsing, as if the station itself was alive and guiding him. Marcus pushed the door open. Beyond it, a narrow staircase led further down, into the black heart of the subway. The whispers followed, now chanting his name in unison, surrounding him, burrowing into his mind. "Marcus. Beneath. Ours." He descended, step by step, knowing that whatever awaited below had been waiting for decades, learning, evolving, preparing for him. The tapes had warned him, but it was too late. The station had him now, and the thing beneath would not release him. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but there was no turning back. The tunnels twisted behind him, erasing the path he had come, leaving him alone with the shadows, the whispers, and the thing that had waited so long in the dark. Marcus' boots splashed through icy water as he descended the narrow staircase, the flickering light from above barely illuminating the abyss below. Each step echoed, swallowed by the darkness that seemed endless, as though the station itself were swallowing time. His heart pounded with a rhythm that matched the hum beneath the tracks, a deep, throbbing pulse that resonated through the stone and steel. The staircase opened into a cavernous tunnel. The air was thick, heavy, and suffused with a metallic scent that made Marcus gag. Pipes ran along the walls like arteries, vibrating faintly with energy, pulsing in tandem with the whispering that had become constant in his mind. Ahead, he could see it, a dim, flickering glow, uneven and irregular, but unmistakable. A space larger than any station tunnel, walls curved and warped, as if forged by something alive rather than built by human hands. And from within, that glow emanated a low, resonating vibration, a heartbeat that did not belong to any human. Marcus moved forward cautiously, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Shadows clung to the walls, stretching toward him, crawling like living things. Then he saw movement, more than movement, shapes detaching from the darkness, twisting and crawling across the walls like smoke-made flesh. Their eyes, hundreds of them, reflected light that shouldn't exist, and they all fixed on him, patient, waiting. The whispers intensified, a chorus now, each voice overlapping the next, insistent, unyielding, that you're here, you belong, beneath, ours. He stumbled over rubble, boots slipping on slick, wet stone. The glow ahead revealed what the station had been hiding. In the center of the cavern was a mass of writhing forms, black and shapeless, limbs bending and twisting at impossible angles, heads tilting in unnatural synchrony. The thing beneath the station, the heart of this nightmare, was alive, conscious, watching him, anticipating his every move. Marcus tried to back away, but the tunnel had shifted. The walls curved inward, closing the path behind him. He was trapped. The whispers filled his head, their rhythm now matching the pulse of the creature at the center. Panic surged, yet a part of him, a stubborn, desperate part, forced him forward. As he approached, he saw movement within the mass. Something larger, impossibly vast, emerged from the writhing shadows. Its eyes glowed faintly, void-like, reflecting every ounce of fear in Marcus' heart. Limbs twisted, joints bending in ways that made his stomach churn. Its presence radiated intelligence, malevolent, patient, eternal. The whispers coalesced into a single voice inside his mind. You have come, as we knew you would. Marcus fell to his knees, chest heaving. He had no weapons, no options. But the creature did not strike. It watched, and then slowly it extended a limb, or what could be called a limb, toward him, folding space and shadow like it was tangible. The air shimmered with its presence, bending reality, twisting the very physics of the cavern. From the walls, hundreds of black eyes blinked open in unison, each reflecting the growing horror in Marcus' mind. He realized with chilling clarity, this was not just a creature. This was the station itself, an intelligence forged from decades of fear, feeding, learning, growing. A sudden memory flashed, one of the tapes he had listened to, that the station chooses. Once it has chosen, it does not release. Not alive, not dead. It keeps them beneath. Marcus scrambled backward, hitting the wet stone floor. The whispers became screaming, chanting his name in a chorus of thousands, all blending into one unbearable sound. That beneath. Marcus. Ours. He bolted, running through the warped tunnel, the glow behind him pulsing as if the station were breathing. Shapes lunged from the walls, elongating and snapping back into shadows, attempting to ensnare him. Every step forward felt preordained, as if the station knew exactly how he would move, how he would fall, how he would fear. At the far end of the tunnel, a faint light glimmered, perhaps an exit, perhaps a trap. Marcus didn't hesitate. He charged forward, sprinting, heart hammering, lungs burning, with the mass of shadowed shapes following silently, relentlessly. As he neared the light, the whispers rose to a deafening crescendo. That you cannot leave. The heart waits, and then the light flickered violently. Marcus felt himself being drawn downward, the floor giving way beneath him, pulling him toward the center of the station's heart, where shadow and matter twisted together in a living nightmare. In that instant, Marcus understood there was no escape. The station had chosen him, and it would keep him beneath, forever learning, forever feeding, forever waiting. Marcus' legs gave way beneath him as the floor of the tunnel seemed to melt, collapsing into darkness. He plunged downward, falling through an invisible void, the walls and ceiling twisting as if the station itself were alive and bending reality. His flashlight flickered weakly, barely illuminating the edges of the abyss. Cold, metallic air rushed past him, carrying the faint whispers he had learned to dread. That beneath. Marcus. He landed with a wet, painful thud on slick stone. Pain shot through his back, but he barely noticed. The cavern around him was unlike anything he had seen, a vast, cathedral-like space stretching beyond the reach of his feeble light. Pipes hung like stalactites, dripping foul liquid. Shadows crawled along the walls and ceiling, coiling like serpents. From the far side of the cavern, a low hum resonated through the floor, vibrating into his bones. It was alive, not mechanical, not electrical, alive. Marcus realized that every whisper, every movement, every shadow was part of one consciousness, the station itself, or something older, something that had grown beneath it, learning from decades of human fear. A sound behind him made him spin. Shadows detached from the walls, twisting into humanoid forms, hundreds of black eyes reflecting the dim light. They moved in silence, fluidly, circling him. Marcus' heart pounded in his chest, a frantic rhythm echoing through the cavern. That you cannot leave. You belong beneath. He forced himself to move, stumbling through the muck and debris. The whispers had become screams, overlapping in multiple voices, inside his head, inside his chest, inside his bones. He realized with horror that the station wasn't just guiding him, it was feeding on him, learning him, predicting him. As he ran, he came across a narrow metal walkway suspended over an abyssal chasm. The shadows lingered at the edges, undulating like living smoke. He could see glimpses of movement far below, vast, serpentine forms writhing in darkness, their scale and number incomprehensible. The thing that had pursued him from the upper tunnels now waited here, in the deepest level of the station. A whisper, directly in his mind, coiled around his thoughts. That come to the heart. Join. Beneath. Marcus' breath came in ragged gasps. He knew instinctively that this was the final descent. Beyond this point, the station held no mercy, no human path, no escape. Yet something primal, stubborn, screamed at him to continue. If he stopped, if he succumbed to the fear, the station would claim him. He took a trembling step onto the walkway. The metal groaned beneath him, vibrating as if alive. Shadows lunged from the walls, scrabbling toward him. But as he ran forward, the abyss below seemed to twist, revealing another path. A spiral staircase carved from the stone itself, descending further into the unknown. With no other option, Marcus descended. Each step felt heavier, as though the station was pressing down on him. The whispers grew louder, merging into a single, deafening voice. That the heart sees you. The heart knows you. You are ours. At the bottom of the staircase, he found a chamber unlike any other. Walls pulsating like flesh, dripping with black liquid. The air thick with electricity and decay. Shadows clung to the surfaces, moving independently, stretching impossibly, reaching for him. And there, in the center, it waited. The creature, or the heart of the station itself, towered above him. Limbs twisted in ways that defied anatomy, eyes void black and reflecting every ounce of Marcus' fear. Its presence radiated intelligence and malice. Marcus' last instinct was to flee, but the walls shifted, closing in. He realized he was trapped. The whispers rose to a crescendo, vibrating through the very stone, the very air, the very core of Marcus' being. That you are beneath, forever, ours. And as the shadows surged toward him, the last light of his flashlight flickered and died, plunging him into absolute darkness, where the station's heartbeat echoed endlessly. Marcus understood. He was no longer just in the station. He was part of it now. Marcus' entire body ached as he crouched in the suffocating darkness of the station's heart. The air itself pulsed with a rhythm that matched his own terror, a heartbeat not his own. Deep, omnipresent, and alive. Shadows danced along the walls, elongating, twisting into grotesque shapes. And all at once, the whispers became a chorus, screaming in a dozen voices. That you are beneath. You belong. Forever. From the shadows, the entity emerged, larger and more terrifying than Marcus had imagined. Its limbs bent and snapped in impossible angles, joints cracking like broken machinery. Eyes, hundreds of them, lined its amorphous body, all fixed on him with a malevolent intelligence. The whispers condensed into a single voice inside his head, that the heartbeat chooses. It knows. It sees. Marcus backed away, stumbling over slick, blackened stone. The floor beneath him pulsed like living tissue, rising and falling, as though the station itself were breathing. The walls stretched and contracted, closing in, reshaping reality around him. He realized with a chilling clarity, he was inside the station's mind, trapped in its will. He tried to run, but every corridor, every path, seemed to twist impossibly, folding back upon itself. The creature advanced silently, effortlessly, a predator moving in a space that Marcus could not comprehend. Panic rose to a fever pitch, yet a spark of defiance surged inside him. He had survived this long. He could not surrender now. Marcus grabbed a broken pipe from the floor, swinging it desperately. The shadow recoiled slightly, but not from fear. It paused, as if amused. Its attention returned fully to him, and the whispers intensified. That your fear, your heartbeat, fuels us. Suddenly, a section of the wall rippled, revealing another passage. Marcus didn't hesitate. He bolted through it, crashing into a spiral tunnel that led upward. The shadows followed, creeping along the walls and ceiling. But the upward motion gave him hope. Light appeared ahead, a faint, artificial glow, distant but real. As he ran, he realized the station itself was watching. Every turn, every breath, every heartbeat had been recorded, remembered. He was no longer just a victim. He was part of its game, part of its memory, a fragment in its endless corridors. The tunnel opened into a massive, ruined platform. Above, faint lights flickered, suggesting a return to the familiar world, a chance at escape. But Marcus froze as he saw movement on the tracks. Not trains. Figures, shadowed, elongated, humanoid, stood silently watching. And in the far end, another door pulsed, faintly glowing, whispering his name. Marcus. Beneath. Come. Again. A cold realization hit him. The station was not finished. It had more layers, more horrors, more games. Marcus might escape for now, but the heartbeat, the consciousness of the subway, would never forget him. It had chosen him, marked him, and it would call him back. He turned to run, and the shadows surged. But just as the light above promised freedom, the screen of his mind fractured. A single whisper lingered, echoing endlessly. That next time, the heart awakens, and you will not run. Marcus disappeared into the dim glow above, leaving the station silent once more. Yet beneath the tracks, the heartbeat continued, eternal, patient, and hungry. The subway's secret remained, waiting for the next soul brave, or foolish, enough to descend into the darkness. Wow, Marcus' nightmare tonight didn't feel like it was just a story from our imagination, did it? Feeling completely alone in the dark depths beneath the subway, where lights flicker, shadows move, and whispering voices follow you. It's truly spine-chilling. But remember, this was only the beginning. Marcus may have escaped for now, but that darkness, that unknown station, it's still waiting, silently, patiently, and hungry. In the deepest tunnels, there are secrets yet to be discovered, shadows more terrifying than before, and the beings Marcus will one day encounter again. And this is where you, our viewers, come in. If you don't want to miss the next terrifying journey, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. In the next video, you'll witness Marcus venturing deeper into the station's heart, uncovering horrors you've never imagined. Do you think Marcus will really escape? Or will the station consume him completely? In the next chapter, the answers will slowly unfold. But one thing is certain, the tunnels will be darker, the shadows hungrier, and the fear much more real. So don't miss the next video, because the horror isn't over. The darkness is calling, and once you hear those whispers, they will never leave your mind. Now, tell me in the comments, do you think Marcus will survive, or will the station swallow him forever? And remember, with subscription and notifications on, you won't miss a single shadow, a single whisper. Get ready for fear, because the underground is waiting for you.